So I have the great pleasure of introducing you. So just let me start by saying that Paul is a graduate of Drexel University. He's an alum. And he's also a member of the Charles E. Close School Advisory Board, a generous supporter in many ways of all that we do here at Close. I'm going to read a bio that was provided, but as I read this, everyone, I want you to really pay attention to Paul's vast skills and experiences across so many areas and disciplines. Extremely impressive. How he's accelerated his career and his array of skills. But even more importantly, when I say skills, I don't only mean technical and analytical skills that are important. And you can see him smiling. What a wonderful personality, right? But it's also his people skills and his leadership skills. And I think as you go into the Close School, that's one of the most important things that we teach is this great entrepreneurial attitude, character, and mindset. And that is certainly more than embodied by Paul Melchiorre. So I will now give the professional, your professional bio, Paul. Yeah, right, right. So he currently is operating partner at Stripes, which is a company that focuses on SaaS portfolio companies, assessing and advising on go-to-market strategies. He is also an independent director at R3, which is an enterprise blockchain technology company, and Scout RFP, which is a sourcing and procurement software company, as well as a nonprofit company, Spark.org. Previously, he also served as Global Customer Officer and Chief Revenue Officer at Anaplan, a leading, and you may have heard of them, SaaS platform to facilitate financial planning and management, where he contributed to a successful IPO in 2018 and saw the company grow from 80 million to 300+ million in annual revenue and over to a $7 billion market cap. Prior to that, Paul served as Global Vice President at Ariba. These are companies I'm sure you've heard of, where he joined as the first outside executive in 1998, built the field organization for sales, implementation, service, alliances, and channels, ultimately leading to a sale to SAP for approximately $5 billion. Earlier in his career, he actually played a role in SAP's rise to global leader in enterprise software. He joined there as an employee, employee number 200. That's interesting, Paul, in in the US, and ultimately rose to executive vice president of global accounts, where he was responsible for over 85% of revenue in the Americas division in a field organization of 1,000+ people. And again, what is not on this is the great philanthropist that Paul and his beautiful family are. He's local, he's from Philadelphia. I feel like he's family. And so I'm very pleased and grateful. So Paul, I will let you take it from here.
Thank you, Donna. I feel your family as well, as is the Close School and all of the Drexel family of dragons, if you will. So first of all, it's an honor to welcome incoming freshmen. I can't remember how long ago it was, but it was a long time ago when I was a freshman. So, you know, a lot has changed since then. And maybe what I'd like to do is just kind of talk a little bit about how I got through that career and highlight some of the things that maybe you don't see on the technical resume or on the LinkedIn, and what I think made me successful and some of the challenges and the choices through that journey. And hopefully it, you know, will help to inspire. And, you know, if any of you all get through these, you know, next couple of years in school, and if you're entrepreneurs, you're going to want to lean on that network and some of these things that I'll talk about as you go and follow your dreams and your careers. So like Donna said, I was born and raised in Philly, South Philly. In fact, when Roger and I were talking, I think I was neighbors with his grandma. So it's a very small city, Philly. I don't know how many other folks are from the Philly area, but it's an amazing city. And, you know, growing up here and spending, you know, most of my life in the city, it's a great place. It's an interesting place. And I think if I, you know, talk about South Philly when I grew up, it kind of was a little different maybe than it is now, right? I like to say pre-gentrification. So it was a rough area. We had about 800 kids in our high school. about 80 went to college. So needless to say, it was not a prep school. And so, a lot of folks went different ways. And I knew back then, I said, there's only two ways you can really go out of this thing. One is probably not a good career path. And another one is get out and try to get educated and make something of yourself. So I knew that very early on, that I had to be entrepreneurial. I had to work harder. I had to do things that, that other folks weren't doing, especially, in the area where I grew up. So I kind of started the entrepreneurial aspect actually down here at the beach where I am now when I was about 12. So we didn't have a ton of money, so we had to work. And at 12, I started selling newspapers on the beach in Wildwood, New Jersey. And I realized pretty quickly that the more newspapers you sold, the more money you made. So I thought maybe then that sales might have been something that might have been a decent career for me. But of course, at 12, you're just trying to find whatever you're trying to do at 12. So, but that was the initial entrepreneurial kind of bug that I had. And, through high school, I just thought I was going to be an attorney. That was my dream. I wanted to be, a lawyer with the prestige and, wear a suit every day. And then unfortunately, I realized as I was in my senior year at undergrad at Villanova that I had all these things called student loans, and you actually had to pay them back. And then the thought of getting a bunch more student loans that I'd have to pay back, for law school, I'm like, maybe food and something else might be a little more important in the next couple of years. So, the hierarchy of needs kind of came in, and we said, okay, maybe I'll push off the law school thing and go get a job. And, this is the first time I kind of realized also that luck plays a lot of, how your career goes and how your life goes. And, I just happened to, be interviewing in senior year, and, early mid 80s, not the greatest time to find jobs, but, they were out there. And I had an envelope that had ADP, automatic data processing, where I started my career, sitting on my, kitchen table, and my sister's boyfriend, she had just met at the time, comes in, who's now still my brother-in-law 30 something years later. He says, "Oh, Paul," he says, "ADP, my dad's like a big shot over there. He's like the head of sales for global accounts or big accounts." I'm like, "Get out, really?" I'm like, okay. So now I'm figuring, how do you work the network? Because that's what it's all about, right? So fortunately, Bob like me, I'm sure he, his son like my sister. So he makes a phone call, he preps me for the interview, and magically I get the job. Now, was I the most qualified? Did I have the best grades? Probably not, but I knew Bob, and that's sometimes how it works. And, ADP was a really good first job out of college, especially if you were in sales, because especially back in 83, 84, people, today don't invest, companies just don't invest big money in training programs. You get trained for 2 weeks, and in 2 weeks you get sent out and, okay, good luck, call us if you need us. So ADP, they had this great training program. I spent a year in an internship program where I really learned the market. And, they gave me the crappiest territory in Northeast Philly, but at least I had a job. And I'll never forget, like the first couple of calls I went on, I had this cool Camaro IROC Z28 with the T-tops, and I have this great media come out. The T-tops are gone. Yeah. So needless to say, it was interesting to have that first job out of school. And I realized, I said, look, just like anything else, if I'm successful in selling, I make more commission and get success. And the first 3 years, after college, I was actually going to Drexel part-time to get my MBA. Now, they didn't have the programs they have now where you can get your MBA like in a weekend. This was like one night a week for like 10 years. I think it took me to get, I think I'm still waiting to get fully, certified in my MBA, but it was a different way of doing it. And I worked during the day, went to school, 1 or 2 nights a week at night. And that was just hard work. And a lot of people, don't realize it, sometimes just working hard. And if you work smart and get lucky, great things can happen. And so after 3 or 4 years there, I figured the network works. And I had one of my bosses say, "Hey, come visit this place. I want to take you to this place called MEI Basic 4. Now, I'm sure no one's heard of MEI Basic 4, right? Nobody, right? It was a hardware company. They competed with IBM, HP, Data General back in the 80s. Mini computers were kind of making a play with personal computers. The mainframe was kind of going away. And, I had a couple of really good years, in 87, 88, and even into 89 before the first Great Recession. And, I had all the good accounts and I was doing well. And then I'll never forget, it was probably 88, 89, right before the crash. I meet this guy, Ben, right? I had no idea who he was, but he was a, leverage buyout guy. And this was before his name was on our school of business. And so I go on to his boat, right? And it was, we had a club trip in St. Thomas. And we go on to, this was like a Tiger Woods yacht, Donna. It was unbelievable. It was like 200-foot yacht. Take your shoes off. It had a discotheque, beautiful bedrooms. And then I realized, I'm like, okay. And I think it was called the Stefarin because his son was Steve and his daughter was Karen. I might have made that up. But from that point on, I'm like, I wanted to be Ben, right? I'm like, what is this guy doing that he's got this 200-foot yacht? And, it was pretty cool. And, of course, he was a leverage buyout guy, made a boatload of money. That was the good news. The bad news is MAI, because they were on the other side of it, they couldn't pay the debt. They were going out of business. We weren't making payroll or expenses. And so it's kind of, if you think about we're in these times of crisis, in 89, it was the first recession. Stock market crashed. It was a bad time. And we were worried whether or not our next paycheck at MAI was going to go to our payroll or go to pay Ben's fuel for his boat. I was figuring it was going for the fuel for the boat. So I was like, I got to go do something else. I had a couple of big customers locally, Foamex that made foam down in Eddystone, Sealy mattress out in Ohio. And these were some of my accounts. And we couldn't pay our bills to get equipment from like Hewlett Packard, who we were reselling their printers. And so I started a company called Melchiorre that bought stuff from HP, and sold it to our MAI customers because we were on credit risk and couldn't get any. And I did that for like about a year and a half until like 90, 91. And I was making more money selling printers out of my mom's basement, my uncle's basement, my friend's, anywhere I could find, storage facility to keep these big, dot matrix printers. This is before you went on Amazon and ordered a printer and plugged it in and it worked. You actually had somebody come in and install it. So I had the service guys at night who would work for MAI during the day, come and install the printers at night. It was actually a pretty cool business. And, for a while I was like, wow, this could go on forever. But then, the company was doing worse and worse. And somebody came to me in like 91 and a couple of guys I worked with at ADP and said, hey, there's this company called Systems, Applications, and Products in Data Processing, German company, better known as SAP back then, right? So we had like less than 200 people. And initially they came to me and they said, well, the sales plan is kind of a weird comp plan. It's a big salary and a very small bonus. So there's no commission. So I'm like, well, wait a minute. Like my whole thing in sales was if I sell more newspapers, I make more money. If I sell more printers or more hardware, I make more money. You mean to tell me no matter how much I sell, I can only make, and it was not a bad wage, don't get me wrong. I said, no, I don't think I'm interested. I'll keep doing this other thing. So then about a year later in 91, the HR guy calls me up and, he says, look, we have a new comp plan. We're going to try out an experiment. We're going to do a much smaller base salary with a 5% commission on anything you sell. And then I'm like, okay, I'm in. So I joined in 91. In 92, I had a decent year. In 93, I sold $65 million of SAP software at 5% commission, which back in 93, that's a lot of money. I mean, that's a lot of money today, I think, but that was kind of the first big jump. Then of course you'd think that would be great, which it was, because if you think about SAP, that whole story of them in the 90s, taking advantage of the move from the mainframe to client server, they went from, I don't know, they had 1,600 employees when I started globally, 200 in the US, and they were doing 400 million in, total value of the company. And then by 98, they were, I don't know, 45 or $50 billion market cap company with, 100,000 or whatever it was employees. So it was really this astronomical growth rocket ship that you talk about luck and being in the right place at the right time. Now, why they picked the Philadelphia airport area to be their global headquarters for America, don't know, but it worked out good for me. I was one of the first people in there. I had no management experience, zero. Never read a management book. I don't think I had read a book since college, So it was like, here I am now, running a multi-billion-dollar software company, with thousands and thousands of people reporting to me and making $1 million plus salary. It was a pretty cool, career up to 98. The problem was it was kind of, all right, I'm making this money, which was good money, but we were like killing Oracle and JD Edwards and PeopleSoft and, MSA and all these companies. I mean, SAP was a rocket ship. We were destroying these companies. And then I'm looking at the S1s of these companies and I'm all right, I'm making $1 million, a lot of money. But the guy from JD Edwards, who I'm killing these guys, or PeopleSoft, I'm winning 9 out of 10 deals. He or she's making 20 million in stock options. So I'm like, what's going on here? Something's wrong. And we realized that, the Germans they paid you a nice wage, but they didn't provide any equity, right? And so how do you make the equity? And this is what's great about talking to entrepreneurs, because the way you build wealth is not through W-2, because if you get a W-2, the government takes half, your ex-wife takes the other half. By the time you're done, it's a much smaller number where, if you get and create real wealth, and that's through equity, right? And so you didn't have to be a math major or statistician to figure it out. But in 98, we were doing incredibly well. I mean, SAP was at the pinnacle of what we were doing. It was a great job, a great high profile job. And we said, look, we want to go talk to Hasso Plattner, the head of the company, and see if we can get him to change the compensation model so that we can be, justly compensated. So I was running sales, and then there was this lady, Eileen, at the time her name was Basho. She's had 3 or 4 husbands. She's like my mentor. She's amazing. She's like, we'll go talk to him. I'll go with you. And I'm like, okay, because I'm running all the delivery, you're running all the sales. He's got to listen to us. We're like 60% of the revenue of the company. So sure enough, we set this meeting up in early March 98 with Dr. Plattner. He has no idea why we're coming. We go in there and we have this charts and graphs and all these 10K reports and all this stuff. And, I remember saying to well, in all due respect, Dr. Plattner, when I started, you were worth 400 million. Now you're worth 46 billion. And I said, I'm making $1 million a year, which is great. But then when you talk about taxes and everything else, I mean, I don't want to be here 25 years from now with some Rolex watch. I mean, I want to send my kids to private school. I want to do all these things and have wealth. And I remember he looked at me and he says, well, in Germany, we don't do it like that. And I said, well, Dr. Plattner, we're in Palo Alto. We're not in Germany. You can treat the German people any way you want, but when you're talking about Silicon Valley, this is what we're competing against. And I'll never forget, he kind of said a few things, and then Eileen, she was masterful in her presentation. And I said, to Eileen, I said, as we walked out, I said, do you think he's going to give us stock? And she politely said NFW in a very nice little Irish girl way. And I'm like, okay. Within 30 days, she went off to Siebel Systems to run something, and then became a big shot at Gartner and a CEO at Sparta. And then I left to go to this place called Ariba. So it was a calculated risk because, I was making $1 million a year. And, now all of a sudden this guaranteed money from this giant company turns into, equity that could be worth nothing, right? It's wallpaper, it could be zero. And I remember going through the job process, and a lot of folks wanted to hire me because I was running SAP. I'll never forget, there was this guy, George Gilbert from CS First Boston. He said, you should talk to these guys at JD Edwards. They had just gone public. So I fly out to Denver. I go meet with the executives at JD Edwards, and they come back like a week later with a ridiculous offer, $1 million signing bonus in 1998. I'm like, wow, I felt like Michael Jordan, right? I was like, wow, that's pretty impressive. I said, but I really wanted to go do this Ariba thing. And George Gilbert says, he said, well, the reason he did that is I told him if you went to go run sales there, I would upgrade your stock from a hold to a buy. And then I figured, okay, I don't want that pressure on me. I was like, that was a little too much. I'm like, I'm going to go do the Ariba thing. And we did. And it was a great experience because it was pre-revenue. We were moving this thing to the internet, and there was all these unknowns. And I moved to Silicon Valley, which is you talk about being an entrepreneur. And then I think Philly's a lot better now, but I mean, back then, it was all about you were in Silicon Valley or maybe Boston, but really was in the Valley, and packing up and moving there and joining this company, Ariba. I didn't know what they did. It was like procurement. I said, what does that mean? Buying stuff. But we really just took a very manual process, put it onto if you remember back in, and Donnie, you may or may not, you're a lot younger than me, but back in 98, when you did procurement in a large company, you had to get your pen and press really hard onto something called NCR paper. Now, I know none of the students know what that is, but it's like 5-part paper, and then one would go to accounts payable, another one would go to accounting, another one would go to the shipping dock, and it was a very manual requisitioning process in these companies. So we automated that. And then what we did is we actually put the buyers and suppliers onto a network, kind of like EDI back in the day. We replaced it where, one buyer can deal with multiple suppliers one way through a protocol we made up called Commerce XML. So we went from literally pre-revenue to a $40 billion market cap at the height of the .com era in 2001. So, I mean, it was just like nothing you could imagine. And I never forgot, I got my 15 minutes of fame when the head reporter for Europe wanted to interview me about SAP's fall and missing the internet and, all these internet companies taking off. And I said, well, I don't know if I want to do that. He said, no, this will be good for you. So we did. And I think the Ariba stock was up $15 that day. So I sold my soul for the equity, but it was not payback, but it was good to know that I was able to pack up, take that risk, leave, do very, very well. But, with anything that falls, comes very high, the fall down is pretty dramatic. So when you go from, 0 to 3,800 people and, up to a $40 billion market cap, it was almost as big as SAP's at the time. And then you go down, .com hits, it was pretty humbling. So, from 40 billion to like 4 billion, literally over a couple of weeks, lawsuits everywhere, 3,800 people down to 800 people. So, 2001 was amazing. 2002 was not amazing. It was terrible. And I'll never forget there was a guy, Chuck Phillips, who I think he's the CEO of Infor now. He was the CEO of Oracle until his mistress put 2 billboards up, one in Silicon Valley on 101 and one in Times Square with pictures of themselves. And then he got fired after that. So you should Google Chuck Phillips. Anyway, Chuck was doing the internet stuff with Mary Meeker back in 01 .com days. And I asked Chuck, I said, I'm not a analyst, but this thing pets.com, if you remember pets.com, they were valued at more than all of the revenue in the world for any pet food combined. So I kind of started thinking, I'm like, okay, this doesn't sound right. Like, are pets going to eat more? What's the value? And then I said, well, Chuck, how are you valuing Ariba? And he said, well, Paul, we really haven't figured that out. And so I got very nervous. I'm like, okay, so anytime I vested one share, I sold immediately and put it in the treasuries. Thank God. Because when you go from 40 billion to 4 billion, it's not good. But anyway, in 2002, I moved back to Philly, and that's how I got reconnected with Drexel. I think I might have got my diploma by then, technically. But anyway, there was something called, I don't even know if you remember the Science Center. So it was at 38th and Chestnut. This was before the closed school. This was, I think, it might even been pre-Biata. So it was back in 02, I think it was. I got connected with a few ex-Drexel alums that were starting a business called Expense Watch. It was taking expense management and putting it into the cloud. And in 2003 and 4, the cloud wasn't, you couldn't find the clouds. There was no software as a service. I mean, Salesforce had not even been public, I don't think. And so we tried to raise money in Philly, and talk about trying to raise money in Philadelphia in 2003, 4 for a company that was doing software as a service. First of all, people didn't even know what it was. It was so frustrating. So we just figured, I don't think this is going to work. And then, we had about 100 customers, and we're small customers. And we get a call from this company, some ladies that's running this thing called Bezos Expeditions. It's a venture firm supposedly associated with Jeff Bezos, who actually had been using our software. And Jeff was interested in talking to us. So I figured this is like one of my buddies trying to, punk me, doing an Ashton Kutcher. Yeah, sure. And I'm like, nah, that's not for real. It's fake. So we actually called back the lady and said, who set you up to this? And she says, no. I really work for Jeff Bezos. So like, get out. No, you don't. Sure enough, we were on a plane 2 days later to Seattle. We had a 30-minute meeting with Jeff. He kept us there for an hour and a half. We were looking for $2 million. So he said, what if we did all these great things, gave stuff away for free and did all this other stuff? How much money would you need? I'm like, well, Jeff, we really only need 2 million. Well, 2 million to Jeff, even back then, before he was the richest guy in the world, wasn't a lot of money. So he said, how about if I give you $7 million at an incredibly high valuation? It was like Shark Tank. So we leave the meeting, we're all excited. He comes back to speak to the company. And I had kind of a sinking feeling. I'm like, this is too good to be true. Is it a dream? Somebody's punking me. Sure enough, when somebody gives you 7 million and you really only need 2, what do you think you do? You spend like a drunken sailor. I mean, we blew through that money so quickly. And then of course by 05 we're bankrupt. Jeff's not interested anymore, and Salesforce was this great thing that was running, and we were 2 to 3 years ahead of our time. So, the company was still around. They just got bought out by some other company not too long ago. So it did survive, but it was I'll say a very humbling experience. And so in 05, I went back to Reba. We rebuilt the company back up, sold it to SAP in 12, but Expense Watch wasn't really a mistake. It was kind of more of a learning experience. My biggest mistake was in 2009, I think it was, right in the height of the whole recession. Actually, Ariba was doing very well in 09 because, it was a spend management platform. So people, needed to save money. So our business actually was growing, and we had the SaaS product by then. And a friend of mine, Anil, we used to go to the Final Fours with a couple other friends. And he said, hey, I'm starting this thing. I got about 100 employees. We got the product. We got our first customers. Company's called Workday. And, I'm looking to have you come in and run sales. And I said, Anil, I got these 2 new little kids. I got 2 other kids in high school. I can't really commute from Philly to Pleasanton, and I had done okay at Ariba. And I said, I don't think so. So now if I calculate, if I had taken that job and cashed in normally in 4 or 5 years after I would have left in like 2012, 13, I would have made about 100 million. Today's price, it'd be about 1.3 billion. So I screwed that one up. Yeah, a lot. That was a big mistake. Yeah. So, but in retrospect, I got to watch the kids play their, sports and grow up and all that. And it is priceless, but for $1 billion, I would have watched via FaceTime or something, So, but anyway, it was a great, kind of run with Ariba. And when we sold to SAP in 2012, I didn't want to go back to SAP, although the Germans, they're like, they know everything about you. They gave me my old employee number back. They had every bit of my, I'm like, wait a minute, this is weird, But I said, look, I'm not showing up. I'm not going to go there. I mean, they owed me money. We worked something out. I went to iPipeline, which was a local company. And I was president there for 3 years, which was hard because I had to learn a new business, right? It was selling insurance software to insurance companies, very cult-oriented group. I went to a session, a conference. I didn't know anyone. I mean, it's the first time I ever went to I was doing this for 30 years. I knew everybody and I didn't know anybody. So it was a big kind of transition. We did well. We sold the company 3 years later to another PE firm. And then I swore in 2016, Don, I was going to retire, right? Promised everybody. Then I get a call about this time in 2015 from my old boss at Ariba, Bob. He's on the board of this company in Silicon Valley. They're doing okay, but they need some parental guidance. I'm like, yeah, you call me for parental supervision? It's probably not ideal. So sure enough, I interview, I start January 16 at Anaplan, and 2 months in, they fired a CEO, and the company's in kind of a little bit of disarray. And, I'm the interim CEO along with the new CFO. And for 12 months, it was a disaster. I'm commuting back and forth, all the things I didn't want to do for like $1 billion. Now I'm doing for probably don't know if I was going to make any money. And, it worked out well. We went through a process, and, 17, we had gotten the company back on track. We hired my buddy's brother as the CEO. He was the CFO of Cisco and then Red Hat, and we brought him in. We handed him an S1 and said, here, we're ready to go public, sign it, let's go. About a year later, we dialed the thing up and we went public in October of 18. You know, the market's been pretty well, over the last couple of years. So it was a good situation. And then they brought a bunch of new folks in and I got fired in September. They brought some other folks in and those people are all gone now. So nobody's even in the job. And it was the second time I got fired. I got fired the first time I was 15 and I was delivering pizzas in South Philly. I didn't realize you didn't have a license and you did need to have a license when you're driving to deliver pizzas. But at 15, I just figured, I got a license. So it was the second time I got fired in 35 years. But I'm not collecting the extra 600 or anything. I'm doing okay. Wound up over at Stripes, which is actually a lot of fun. I mean, if you think about what I'm doing now with all these small and mid-sized companies that, we're dealing with all these entrepreneurs, hopefully people like yourselves. And, it's just interesting to see what's happened in the last 6 months, how the world's dramatically changed and how I thought it's brought a lot of opportunity to people. I mean, in 89, I could have just sat back and said, this is terrible, or in 08 or in 01. So I think when you go through these crises, the people who excel are the people with an entrepreneurial spirit, right? And I think if you look at what you guys are about to kind of go into, over the next 3, 4, 5 years, the opportunities, it might not look good now because, oh my God, the world is so uncertain with the disease. And are we going to be online? Are we going to be in the script? That's one way to look at it. Or how do I take advantage of the things that are happening to benefit, right? To your benefit. And if you look at just some of the companies like Zoom and, we're on now. I mean, I knew the guy who was the original head of sales for Zoom, Greg Holmes. He's going to be in my book. Great guy. I mean, he was telling me about how they were trying to go into this market where they already had WebEx and Meet, all these other tools, and now their stock, I can't even calculate the revenue multiple of Zoom now because being in the right place at the right time. And who doesn't know how to, my mom, who's 80, knows how to use Zoom. She's got no choice, right? She tries FaceTime. No, Mom, let me teach you how to do it. And so think about every student, every, business had to learn this new way of communicating literally over, a couple of week time period. So it's accelerated. I was on the advisory board at DocuSign for many years up until, just recently. And, for years, people couldn't get around not signing a document with like wet ink. I'm like, all right. So I just scribble. I don't know who signed it, right? Or then you fax it in. I don't even know if people have fax machines anymore. But then if you have this DocuSign thing, it could encrypt your signature. It knows exactly where you signed it, what device you signed it from, when, how, what IP address, location. I mean, why isn't that safer and easier than doing it, via FedEx or fax? So all these things over the last couple of months, the reason their stock prices are so high is the digital transformation that was going on over the past, 5 years. In the last 5 months, we've gone 5 years accelerated into this transformation. So either you get your act together and figure it out, or you're going to be left behind. And, I think a lot of companies will benefit dramatically by this. And then there are going to be totally industries that get disrupted. I mean, I think there's just going to be new ways of, I even think education too. Think about how, who wants to pay $60,000 to get, nothing personal, Donnie, you look fantastic on the video screen, but you're way more, engaging in person, right? So I think, and there is no way to, replace that. So hopefully we'll get to a hybrid model and then eventually, especially if you're in this entrepreneurial way, the collaboration, the network, the relationships that you build are so critical. Not to say you can't, you've got to pass your English test and all the, prerequisites. That's important. Those maybe you could take online, but everything else, I mean, you look at the value of what a community like Drexel brings, the network that it has, the alumni that it has, the co-op program, which I think turned 100 years last year. I mean, it's just, everybody's trying to copy what we invented 100 years ago, right? I mean, and the way businesses, at least I know in Philadelphia and really outside of Philly, view Drexel as a pool of talent. I mean, I built at iPipeline. We opened up a Philly office just because we wanted to get access to Drexel co-ops, right? And we wanted the A group, you know, the top co-op, because we were getting like the people from Westchester. Nothing against Westchester. I'm sure it's a wonderful institution. Or even Temple, where my son's a dental student, so I can't talk bad about Temple. Or even, you just couldn't get people to go all the way out to Exton. So we moved the office to Philly, and we literally built a huge kind of development hub, mostly on the backs of Drexel engineers in the co-op program. So, I mean, there's just so many things that this community brings. And to have an entrepreneurial school, I mean, think about it. I don't even think they have it. I mean, there's maybe one or two in the country. I don't even think there's an accredited program like ours. It's just such a unique way of delivering education. And I think if I look at the standard way of educating today, it's going to get disrupted. Colleges are going to have to merge. They're not going to get the revenues that they got before. They're going to have to figure out other ways of providing content to sell other than to students, right? So that's why I think Drexel's so uniquely qualified to survive in this new environment. I mean, having an entrepreneurial school, I mean, I learned it the hard way, right, in South Philly. How great would it have been to be able to go to a program like this with a network and with experience? It just, I'm not saying it's easy, kids, don't take it the wrong way, but it's just, it's such a benefit to be able to have this kind of environment with the staff that we have, the ecosystem that we have at Drexel, the alumni network. I mean, if you all aren't excited about whatever September brings, then, you know, I don't know what gets you excited, but, you know, being able to go into an entrepreneurial program like this, especially today, I mean, you look at all these companies are laying people off and, you know, the uncertainty. Who would you rather have faith in? Some company that you don't know, or the company like the Melchiorre Family Partnership, or the, you know, your partnership, your company, because you are the owner, you're in control. And, you know, I really think that, you know, you're well positioned to be in this program. You know, hopefully you all take great advantage of it, leverage the network that we provide, you know, learn as much as you can, you know, in these, you know, time periods that you're going to have maybe a little uncertainty until, you know, we get through this, you know, crisis that we're in. But just know that you're in an environment that I'm happy to be part of. I'm happy to be an advisor. I love working for Donna. She's awesome. And, you know, so I welcome you all. And I wish everybody a lot of luck, because sometimes having luck is important too. But I always say that luck is the residue of design. So, you know, if you're in the right place at the right time, you take advantage of everything, and you happen to get lucky, then, you know, the results are going to be, you know, very positive for you. So with that, welcome to everyone. And I wanted to leave 15 minutes for questions. So did I do good?
Yeah, I have like a bunch of questions. So
you're not allowed to ask questions.
Yeah. So thank you for your kind words about the close school, and such inspiration for our students in that, you know, these are challenging times, but there's also the opportunity. And yep. I love what you sort of wove through in your career, was that a couple of themes, you know, you sort of, you did this on your own. Aside from all the companies you worked for and that you started, your career is very entrepreneurial, you know, in and out of companies, starting your own company, meeting people. And I think that's part of the, as you mentioned toward the end, of the value of a close school education, is that we sort of prepare you for this entrepreneurial track. You know, I don't know if you have mentors. You know, I get that question all the time. Did you have a mentor? I mean, no, I didn't really. It was just sort of, you know, haphazard. But these are, and then the other point that you just made at the end, you know, if you look at companies that are going to hire, what are the skills that they're looking for? Yeah, they're looking for analytical skills, but I think they're looking more for students who have initiative, who have resilience, who maybe have started something. And I mean, I love the way that you positioned as you jumped from one position to another and what was the risk, I would love to sort of delve into, but I want the students to talk, how you how you develop I don't know, the character, the attitude to do that, right? I mean, that's really kind of very interesting. But I'm going to stop there and let the students sort of ask some questions.
You asked like 7 questions.
I know. Sorry.
That's okay.
I'll let the students. Did you want to make any comment on what I said?
Well, yeah, just in a couple of things. I think, what are people looking for today? And I live this as whether it's a board member or working for Stripes and with the portfolio companies. And I think you said it, like resilience, the initiative. Everybody's got a 4.0, right? Everybody, volunteered in the Guatemala or whatever, right? So everybody's got the check boxes. That's kind of almost like the ante up now, right? So let's assume that all those things are there. What is it that makes someone unique that is going to survive in this, especially in today's environment? And I always look for those who are resilient. I mean, I love people where, they maybe the first ones in their families to go to college. They had to pay for their own college. They did things that, they started their own business, even if it was a failure. One of the things I learned going to Silicon Valley, before I would look at a resume and say, oh, you jump around a lot. You've been at 4 different companies in 5 years. I go to Silicon Valley. That's like every resume was like, I'm like, I don't understand what, oh, well, wait, look at all the experience I got at this place. And then we found out that, so you learn from those, not everybody makes the good decisions, or you can make a good decision and not be lucky. So I think that word resilience that you used, now it's hard to find resilience in an interview. But there are ways of trying to ferret that out and figure out whether or not these people are going to be survivors and have the determination and the innovation, right? I mean, you got to kind of have that EQ too. I think that's what people are looking for. And I look at it now from if we're going to invest in an entrepreneur, or we're investing in a startup company or a company that's, at 10 million trying to get to 100 million, what are those things that we as investors look for in these concepts? I mean, it's how big is the market, obviously, and all those kinds of things. But it's also, is this a team that can get me at least to the point where I know either I can make an exit or I can bring in another team to get it to the next level? So I think they're the things that the venture firms and the PE firms look for, and really even any companies are looking for today. And believe me, they're harder and harder to find. I mean, it's not something that, there's a lot of smart people out there, but not all of them have those other intangibles.
Yeah, we like to call them power skills in the closed school, right? Not soft skills, right? They're really the power skills.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll let my students or faculty and staff ask a question.
Yeah, and I just want to say really quick, we have about 6 minutes, so students can grab a quick break before their next activity. So it looks like one question in the chat. Yeah, so Sam Stella asked, do you think networking is one of the most important parts of being successful? Great question, Sam.
Yeah, Sam, I'll tell you, like I said, if you don't have that network, I look at every one of these moves that I made through that time period. A lot of it was based upon, sometimes being lucky, like, my first job out of college where my brother-in-law happened to see the thing on and I called his dad, right? And, the network is really what it's all about. I would have never got the Anaplan job if Bob was, not on the board and brought me in. I probably wouldn't have got fired if we didn't bring his brother in, but that's the separate part. But the network usually works out. I've always say, let the network work. And, there's multiple ways of building a network, but it's something that you have to then build over time, but it doesn't come to you. You got to be outwardly trying to make the right connections. And, in building a network, just be nice to everybody, because you never know when someone in that network is going to be your boss or going to buy something from you. So
yeah,
great question, Sam.
Kayleen, you have your hand raised, and then we'll go to Gia's question in the chat.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask how you handled all the different transitions between the different companies that you've worked for. Like, was the process of transitioning from company to company to company over the years, like, was that really stressful on your mental health, or was that easy? How did you handle that?
Yeah, that's a good question because a lot of people don't like change, right? And I look at the number of places I've been relative to the time period. It's actually quite a small number of transitions, although they were major ones, right? Moving and doing 2 tours of duty in Silicon Valley, having to pack up families, and that is incredibly stressful. Probably more stressful on the other family members, honestly, than yourself. So I think as you're young, you're probably more resilient and have a lot less baggage, if you will, to be able to take those risks and make those moves from place to place. Because it's not easy. If you're comfortable with, you got friends, you go to happy hour, you like it, and it's really hard sometimes to leave. Now, if it's a bad situation, there's no stress. It's easy to leave. But if it's a good situation, and most times you're leaving a good situation for what you think is a better one. I mean, and that's the more challenging one. That's the more stressful one. So I think when you come through those crossroads, get advice. I mean, don't be afraid to leverage your mentor network, talk to people like Don and others about, look, what do you think? And get these different opinions, because a lot of times they can look at it objectively where you have a lot of emotion tied to it. It's hard, but yeah, it's always stressful and challenging, but what do they say? No pain, no gain. That's part of it. But that's a great observation, and not an easy one to answer. But I can tell you, you will face those crossroads, and leverage your friends and networks to help you, get guidance in making those very difficult decisions.
Thank you. And then we have Gia. How did you deal with taking big risks? How did you deal with taking big risks and the possibility of failure?
Yeah, that's a tough one because, when you're giving up something, and I just look at the moving from SAP to Ariba was probably by far the biggest, risk, because I had such a good gig at SAP, and, giving that up for something that you never know, it's kind of hit the lottery ticket, right? But if you don't, buy a ticket, you can't hit the lottery, right? So you just, if you could, that would be great, but that's not the way it works. So, you have to take risks to get the gains, whether in stock market or, in life and all these areas. So I think you evaluate it, you look at it, the timing, and then a lot of it is just your gut feel and say, what, I think it's ready to take that chance. And, like I said, there was times where it didn't work out, and you just got to be prepared that if it doesn't work out, you're going to try again, right? You'll go find another lottery ticket to buy. So, put yourself in good positions to be able to take calculated risks that minimize the risk and maximize the upside. But it's something that doesn't always work out. That's why you have to have a little bit of luck.
Thank you. And hopefully you'll learn a little bit more about that in your Ready, Set, Fail class next year. So
there you go. Yes. But when you fail fast.
Yes. I think that is definitely a motto I've heard from some of my close school students. So going back up, Adam asked, how do you evaluate EQ in a team or person? How do you see how they really operate when they are trying to impress you?
That's a great question. I think we talked about when, how you try to identify these people, because everybody's got all the good checkbox and the book smarts, if you will. And EQ is really hard to determine without experiencing, like I would love to always have seen, if we're interviewing salespeople or whatever, I want them to go through a process. Like if I can visualize and see what they're doing through a process, because everybody looks good in the interview, they all shower, they smell good, and they're dialed up and they all say the right things, and it's hard to decipher, the EQ from that. So I think always trying to spend a little bit more time, more intimately. So like we would ask people to prepare a formal presentation with kind of arbitrary things that they would bring back. And, a lot of it's not something you just go get in a book and then you spit it back. They'd have to actually think through things. And a lot of times you would kind of get an idea of whether somebody was resilient and figured it out, asked a bunch of questions, and could take you down that path and get you out of, and break through, because it's really hard to decipher without spending time with, and now it's even harder now because a lot of these things you have to do without being face to face with people, or, so it's really, really difficult to do that. I think it's a matter of, spending the time, having them do certain activities that show how resilient, how innovative, and what they do in times of crisis. I always try to ask people what was the worst thing that happened to them and how did they, survive it? Because, some people have been through some challenging things, and if, they got through that, this is probably easy. But it's not like you just, here's the list of questions and there's a score. I wish it was that. If you invent something like that, I'll invest in it.
There we go. Someone needs to change their project. Pivot time. Just kidding. Wonderful. So we're getting so many good questions. So I'll finish the questions that are in the chat now, and then once we're done with those, then we'll head out for our break. So thank you, Adam. That was a great question. So Sal asks, other than networking and resilience, what do you think was the most important factor that led to your successes?
Yeah, I think some of it's being in the right place in the right time and taking advantage of it, right? So I said before, luck is the residue of design. You just can't be lucky. You got to be lucky and good. And that's the way I look at it. So if I look back, being at that time at SAP in the early days, I was well positioned. I waited for the right time and then took advantage of that opportunity. And then I remember after I did have that first great year, I said, okay, everybody had that opportunity. I took the biggest advantage of it. And then I leveraged that into a much bigger job by building relationships with the Germans in that, I took it to another level. And so I had the network, but then took advantage of the network, was in the right place at the right time, and then took it an extra step further in developing those relationships with more of the development folks in Germany, because they had really little respect for salespeople back then. They called us Klingenputzers. So, I made sure they understood, and I did a lot of homework to get that respect. So, in that preparation and things like that. So I think, combining all of those things, you really, believe me, homework is important. And I know some of the best salespeople that I've worked with, they know more about the company that they're selling to than the company itself. And because they're doing the homework, it's a lot easier to get the data now today in today's world, but back then it was a little harder. So yeah, I think there's some of the things that have helped.
Great, thanks, Sal. And we have a next question. Dom said I was going to ask the next question. Okay. Aaron asked, what did you learn about the dangers of over-financing from the situation with Jeff Bezos?
Yeesh. Yeah, it kind of scares me a little bit about what's happening today is we just just printing money and overspending. And growing up in an environment where I never had debt and, I try to, keep, fiscally responsible. That was a great learning experience because we took, and because we thought this money came so easily, we were not fiscally responsible. We spent money on things we really would never have spent the money on. And I think when a lot of the companies today are being judged on maybe just the growth, but not a path to profitability, you kind of get away with it. But then there is a time where things level back and then people look at, okay, what are your earnings? What is your path to profitability? How fiscally, secure are you? How capital efficient are you? So I'll tell you, I look now for people who do bootstrap businesses and figure that's, a company that's going to be capital efficient moving forward. And some of these other folks are just, kind of living for the day. I think it might be good for the day, but eventually fiscal, the numbers don't lie. Capital efficiency, things like that, always become important sometime. We just don't know when. Right now, they're not important, but in 6 months, they may be. And no one can time that. Very, very difficult. So, but it's good to have zero interest rates right now. So borrow as much money as you can.
Makes me want to buy a house now.
It's a good time to buy a house.
It's very competitive though. That's the hard part.
That's true.
So the final question from Dom, we have, what are the main focal points that are crucial to rebuilding a company from the ground up, if you had to name a few?
Yeah, I think the first thing is the team, right? I mean, I always say that the company with the best people win. And especially if you're in the early stages of a company, your early hires and the people you partner with are so critical because you just can't make mistakes. I mean, if you have 500 employees and you screw up a couple, it's no big deal. If you have 5 employees and you screw up a couple, big deal. So I think the people, obviously, very, very critical. Second, where you get your money is very important. I mean, early days, I mean, if you could get any money, you'll probably take it. But you got to be careful that, especially as you go through your formal first round of funding, picking the right partners through those rounds of funding are critical. Because, especially today, money's kind of commoditized. You can get money from multiple places. Make sure you're getting it from people who can provide you network access, provide you more money, help you grow the business, do things that add value as opposed to just cutting a check. And then third, and I think most important, pick your early customers properly. And I know that doesn't sound right, but there's so many companies that get early momentum and then they get overwhelmed because they pick the wrong customers. And then those other customers just literally put them out of business, right? Especially if you're developing newer products and a newer technology innovation. Some companies are really good partners to innovate with, and they're the kind of customers you want early on. And then other customers think they're buying something off the shelf. I mean, this isn't Microsoft Excel. It's still not baked yet. We haven't figured it out. We're working with you to figure it out. So make sure you find customers that help you figure that out, because, look, at the end of the day, they're buying it, right? So if you pick good customers, and we used to call them lighthouse accounts at Ariba, find these early on customers, and that's what's going to make it work. So that's kind of the three things: people, find the right money, and find the right customers.